Welcome to Fresh Off the Boat. Today's guest is Ruhani Arya. She's a student I've known since 2010, so it's been a decade, Ruhani. So
In
it's
a decade,
welcome
yes.
to our reunion of sorts, let's just say. And
Thank you.
so
Thanks for having me.
this podcast was initially sort of an idea during times of COVID. We're still kind of facing the blows of it in India. Ruhani, you are in Boston. You've just completed a very coveted MBA degree from Boston, from MIT Sloan School. And prior to that, you were working three and a half years, and prior to
Yep,
that, you graduated with a chemical engineering degree from Cornell University. So it's been
yep,
close to a decade for you in the US as well. So
yep.
just catching up with you, and like I've been doing in the last 1 week with 50 other students I've
Wow.
known in the past. It's been a busy week here. So we've hit a half century. So this is a special edition. Uh,
Awesome.
so, so the first question to you that I have is, moving from Chandigarh, small town, to the US and also to beautiful Ithaca, Cornell. How was it like settling in?
Yeah, great first question. I was actually just thinking about that time, like in the last week as I graduated, thinking about, the first time I ever came to the US. It's a very timely question. Yeah, I mean, growing up, I had never imagined that I would study in the US. It kind of just happened. And I did not know much about Cornell before actually talking with you and you suggesting that I apply and applying. So I don't know, the stars just kind of aligned for me. SATs, Common App, everything worked out, got into Cornell. I came to the US for the very first time alone. So a lot of the parents, sometimes come with their children and drop them off to their college. The case was slightly different for me. So came here quickly, had to make new friends because, I mean, the first few days I didn't know anyone. So wanted to just know more people. Did that quickly, had to figure out, like bank accounts, what courses I wanted to take, just very general stuff. The first couple of weeks were hard in the sense that I'd never been away from my family. So that was the first thing that kind of hits you. But then I think the people that I met, I mean, Indians, Americans, Canadians, people from all over the world, they were just so helpful and supportive in any way they could be that I was just very, very happy with the quality of people that I was meeting. So I think that just kind of made the whole transition process very easy on me. And just, not driving here, like not knowing what place I should go to eat, like I'm vegetarian, common small problems that you have on a daily basis, but they're just more amplified because now you're alone and this is a new country. I think the people around me really made that bearable. And like you said, Ithaca is beautiful, so just kind of exploring a new place, which was daunting at first, but then really became one of my most favorite activities to do. So I'd say like people around me, my friends, helped me with that transition. And after the first semester, I think I really started enjoying myself and, this new education system that I wasn't exposed to earlier. I really started seeing the value in that. And it just became easy.
Fascinating. So if you were to look back and consider identifying three people who really mattered to you at college, could be mentors, peers, seniors, and what is their role in guiding you or being just there for you?
Yeah, sure. I'd say first has to be my group of friends. I will give a shout out to Misha, Radhita, Spandana, and Morgan. We were suite mates, so we lived in the same residence hall for, I think, 3 of the 4 years. And they were, 3 of the 4 of them were from India, so I could just relate to them very easily from the beginning. One of the 3 of them had the same major as me, so we had a lot of overlap in our classes and everything else. So it was just like very easy to interact with them. But I am an introvert, but my friends are not, which was also very helpful because they always like wanting to meet other people, do things that I instinctively did not want to do, but had to because my friends were doing it. And I think that really opened my eyes to things that I wouldn't have done myself otherwise. So I'd say number one, my friends. Number two, I had this professor in chemical engineering that I researched with 2 summers. And this was a topic that I never knew that I would be interested in, but I started working with her and really liked it. And she kind of really pushed me to apply for jobs that I wouldn't have applied for, or think in a way, or, reach for things that I wouldn't have done myself otherwise. So I thought she was a very big influence in my life, and she continues to, reach out and push me to do different things. Her name is Rosianna Zia, by the way. And then number 3, my family wasn't physically there, but I'd say they were very, very important in me just trying to maintain my sanity. And like, even when times were hard, I could always just talk to them. When I didn't get the job I wanted and I thought that I was going to get, they were always on the phone with me, trying to console me, make sure that I keep moving forward and don't stop. So physically they weren't there, but mentally they are such a big support system for me, and have always been. And yeah, I think without them, I could not have gone through those 4 years of my undergrad.
Hey, so this is so fascinating to hear. Now, I really wanted to know about the choices you made in terms of academics. The US obviously follows the flexibility in their offering. The system requires gen eds in different bodies of knowledge. And then, of course, choosing your major. What was it all like? Which courses do you reflect back and say, hey, that was pretty interesting, even though it wasn't part of your major, or things that were part of your major that guided you to sort of push the bar higher?
Yeah, sure. So when I first started at Cornell, I wanted to do environmental engineering. I think that was in part fascinating to me because that was never an option in India. So if you went to an engineering school in India, you could not do environmental engineering at the time. So I wanted to explore something else at Cornell. But when I got there, I realized that if I do something like chemical engineering, I would be able to cover a lot of the things that were fascinating to me about environmental engineering whilst doing other things in addition to that. So that's why I switched to chemical engineering. On a very basic level, I love chemistry and I love math, and chemical engineering is a very good combination of both of those things. It's basically applied math, but using a lot of chemistry. So that was always fascinating to me. And then, like you said, the US education offers a lot of flexibility. Some things were built into our curriculum that we had to do. Like it was called a writing seminar at Cornell. So you had to take 2 courses that were liberal arts courses, and those were mandatory. And there's nothing you could do to get out of it. Trust me, I tried. But it's a good thing that I had to take them. So one of my courses, I studied actually Mahabharata because I'd never done it. And then we had like discussions about the lessons and everything that teaches us. And the second course I took was on Spanish history. Again, I knew nothing about Spanish history before doing that, but I'm so glad that through that course, I got to just kind of expand like this side of history and this knowledge that I didn't have before. So just through doing that, I kind of knew that there is value in this kind of education where, like in India, my experience was that everything was very set for you. Like you do this in standard 9 and then this in, high school after that, and you do that. But in Cornell, I had to pick out everything on my own. So when I took those first 2 courses, I was like, okay, maybe I should try doing other things. So I started taking many different kinds of physical education courses. I was never good at sports. So I was like, this is my only chance to try and learn something new. So I ended up learning different kinds of dances, ended up taking bowling, swimming, things that I would not have tried before. And then to supplement what I was learning on the engineering side, I also decided to do a business minor. So that had courses like basic finance, basic accounting. And personally, I think that no one, should be allowed to graduate from college without, learning about finance and accounting, even just a little bit, even for, personal finance purposes. So I'm very glad that that was an opportunity that I had, and I was able to take basic business courses, and I have a business minor from Cornell as well. But I think going into the real world after that, even if, I was doing business consulting, so the minor was helpful. But even if I wasn't doing that, I think just having that basic sort of foundation for business and finance and accounting was very helpful.
Great. Cornell, like many other highly selective schools, is kind of also given bad press because of its very rigorous academic environment. Particularly in Cornell, people are scared of those gorges, those beautiful gorges, for not so great reasons we keep hearing about. What's it really like? How do you cope with not just academic stress, but just living in a very intense, fast-paced academic institutional sort of life?
Yeah. For me, I'd say just like having just a good group of people that you can always talk to. I think that was my biggest support system. Like I was always hanging out with people from my major, people that I worked on different teams with in different clubs, my friends that I had mentioned before. So I never felt alone. Winters in Ithaca can be especially hard. And, couple that with exams and other things, and you're busy all the time. So that can really take a mental toll on you. But just like having my friends around me, just continuously, like I said, taking silly physical education classes that I just wanted to do, but didn't have to do. I think all of that, and obviously, like having someone to talk to from your family, my brother, my parents were always there to chat with me. So
how about the other extracurriculars, the jobs on campus, the little things that you would just do for distracting your mind, or not you, just saying people could do? And what did you really do beyond just academics? I know you were a teaching assistant, but were there any other interesting things, part of clubs and organizations that you enjoyed participating in?
It's been a while, so let me think. So I was a part of the Society for Women Engineers. I had a leadership position in the club, and my job was to just bring the community of people together. So I got the chance I basically had a budget, and they told me I could do anything as long as it brought people together. So I had all these crazy ideas on Halloween, like hosting movie nights or just doing whatever that was fun, but people could participate in together. So that was one fun thing I did. And then it's not beyond academics, but I mean, I was a teaching assistant for quite a few courses. I think my second or third semester at Cornell, I started tutoring math. So there were 6 to 8 different math courses that I was qualified to tutor for. So that took up a lot of my time, and it also paid. So I think it was a win-win situation. Actually, I learned, the more I taught, the more I learned. And then, like I said, it also paid. Apart from that, summers in Ithaca, and I say summer because you can't really hike in winters, but whenever I could hike, I went out and went to Taganic Falls or Buttermilk Falls, or there's just many, many beautiful places in Ithaca that you can explore if the weather is right. So whenever I could take advantage of those things, I tried to.
Let's switch gears and talk a little bit about your work life since 2015-16 when you graduated, and then right through the time when you started with your MBA program in 2018. How was it like? What do you see the connections with what you learned, and not necessarily just in class, but being around people in college And how did you really apply those academic and life skills at different workplaces? Do you see some connections there? And tell us a little bit about the jobs or the companies that you worked with. So that'll be interesting for people to know. What chemical engineers do, or or maybe not do.
Yeah. So when I was graduating, the oil industry was doing very badly. So this is 2015. My original idea was to go into oil and gas, but I kind of had to change that in 2014. And I started looking for consulting positions, but I knew that I did not just want to do a purely management consulting or purely business consulting. I wanted there to be sort of an engineering angle to it. So I saw this position that was with a company called Alcoa, Aluminum Company of America. And it was a consultant position, but it would involve both strategy and operations work. So that job looked like a good mixture of like the things that I wanted to do. So I applied and I interviewed, and I ended up getting an offer. I moved to Pittsburgh, which was the headquarters of the company at the time. And that was also a big decision because all of my friends were migrating from Ithaca to New York City. And here I was going on my own off to Pittsburgh. But I think it was a perfect job for me because although it was consulting, it was management consulting, but almost on a daily basis, I had to work with engineers on the floor. So I had to travel a lot to different manufacturing facilities and look at processes and operations and find a way to make them better. So I had to speak with a lot of engineers, speak with a lot of scientists, PhDs, and I could understand their language. So when they talked about like stress, strain, like any engineering phenomenon, I was able to understand it, even though I did not have to work on it myself. So I think my engineering education really prepared me for that. So I did that for 2 years, and then I moved to a different group within the same company in the growth and market strategy team. And then I ended up working a lot with the investor relations team of our company. And we used to put out material that was used by the CEO in a lot of earnings presentations. So that kind of, those 3 years at Alcoa, it later became Arconic actually. But those 3 years at Alcoa and Arconic were really helpful to me because they gave me a sense of all different sides of the business. So I looked at the manufacturing facility, I worked with people in the C-suite, I worked with investor relations, I worked with just purely management consultants. So I think I grew a lot during that time.
That's great. And then choosing to do an MBA, it seemed like a natural thing for you to do. Also the timing, was that something you had premeditated? And what was it like at Sloan School, and where are you headed next? So 3 questions.
Yeah, sure. So I knew I wanted to get an MBA, but I wasn't sure on the timing. The timing was more just a result of the visa systems here. So I had a STEM extension after graduating from Cornell, which lasts 3 years. So I knew I had to start thinking of a few things, what I wanted to do next 2 years into my job. So MBA was an option. I applied to a bunch of schools, and sort of backtracking a little bit, I wanted to do an MBA because I realized that I wanted to deepen my understanding of finance and accounting even more. I had a minor in business, but I realized that the best projects, the best jobs in the company that I was in were going to people who had an MBA or had a very deep understanding of finance. And I was missing out on those projects and opportunities. So I thought, getting an MBA, just really diving deep into those subjects would be helpful for my personal growth. So that was sort of my main motivation of doing an MBA. So I applied to a bunch of schools, got into a few, and then I ended up choosing MIT because I just always wanted to come to MIT and they wouldn't accept me for undergrad. So had to find a different way to get here. But I was just very excited about the opportunity to sort of be at the same place where, you know, a lot of very smart people have graduated from, a lot of people that I personally know as well. And just like the focus of MIT on, you know, data and technology. And a lot of people think that people come to MIT to get jobs in tech. And that is true, but a lot of people actually get jobs in consulting. I think that's the thing that most people actually end up doing. Consulting, then tech, then finance. So I feel like, or at the time I felt like I would have a lot of opportunities in front of me if I went to MIT, and I always wanted to go there. So decided to come here. Like I said before, I decided to concentrate on finance mostly. So took a bunch of courses and then ended up recruiting for investment banking. I interned last year at UBS in San Francisco doing investment banking. It's a hard job. I think anyone will tell you that. It's a lot of hours. But I don't think I've learned as much as I did last summer in a long time and before that. I was there for 10 weeks, but because you are on the job for many, many hours every day, you just have to learn to do things fast and well and right the first time. And I thought that was a very valuable lesson I learned from last summer. I like that, and I decided to go back into banking full time. So I will be going back to investment banking, but with a different employer. I will be going to Bank of America in Palo Alto. My job starts next month. So just kind of taking a breather right now before kind of gets crazy again.
All the best. Yeah, this sounds like a fairly interesting journey, and your thought process of making that decision is also very well articulated. So I'm sure listeners would, if they want more information, I'm going to send them your way
Yes,
about
yes,
MBA.
please.
Because there are quite a few students who I've worked with are thinking of pursuing an MBA and sitting out this whatever recession or whatever it turns out to be. So it's a good time to look at grad school for kids who've graduated or have worked for a few years.
Yep.
In a typical B school, there is this notion of a very busy day for students. And since there's so much material to be covered, what was it like for you? Typically, were all days the same? I'm sure they were not, but how would you describe a typical day at MIT Sloan?
Yeah, sure. So at MIT, your first semester is your core semester, which means that basically all of the 400 students are taking the same classes pretty much. So 5 out of your 6 classes are the same. And after your core semester, you get the liberty to choose whatever classes you want to take. So you can take any electives, do finance, consulting, whatever you want to do. A typical day at Sloan, I'd say for me would start at 8:30 a.m. Most of my classes, I try to take my classes early in the morning. And then each class is about 90 minutes long. So I would typically have classes from 8:30 to 11:30. And then I would have a break from 11:30 to 1. And then more classes from 1 p.m. to, let's say, 5:30 p.m. And even during that break, if you are trying to recruit, then you would be going to company presentations where the companies would tell you about, their company, their culture, and why you should apply. Or you would be going to some other presentation that a club is doing, for example, and trying to get more members. So even in break time, you're not really free. You find a way to occupy yourself. And then once classes are done at 5:30, you typically meet with your club, whatever club you are a part of. And then if you want to do any events, if you're leading the club, then you discuss about those events. Or if the club that you're in is organizing an event, then it would typically be in the evening, or like I said, in the lunchtime. Then you would go to that. After that, you would come home, work out if you can, or work out on campus if you get the time in the middle of your day. Have dinner, and then pretty much huddle up with your teams for different classes to talk about cases that were due next day. So that would typically happen from, say, 8 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. So you just work on cases and everything due that week or the next day. And then 11:30, 12, kind of take a breather, look at your phone, your messages, take a shower and go to bed, and then do it all over again.
That's crazy. And what about weekends? Were they any different? Of course, there were no classes, but
Yeah, also in business school, a lot of business schools don't have classes on Fridays. So Fridays are typically only reserved for recitations, for example. So a TA would hold a session on Friday, but a professor would not have a lecture on Fridays. Saturdays and Sundays were a bit different. So those days I would get up at 10 or 11 or even later, but then would have like brunch scheduled with a friend. I think the beauty of coming to business school is that you get to learn from so many different people around you. So you want to kind of make the most of this time. So I always try to schedule something for my weekend brunches with anyone that I wanted to get to know better, or just a friend, because I think there's a lot of power in the connections you make here. So I typically would have brunch with someone, then come back, have a few meetings for work due next week in the afternoon. Saturday evening, typically do something social. There's always events, especially in business school. People are always wanting to hang out with you. So whether it's like watching a movie, doing small group dinners, having, deep conversations with your friends, or silly things, kind of do that Saturday night, hopefully. And then Sunday morning was more of a work time again. So you meet with more teams, do more club stuff. I TA'd quite a bit in business school as well. So just kind of do a lot of grading. If people want to meet with me one-on-one to discuss something, do that. And then if you're recruiting, I think your weekends are dedicated to recruiting, especially if you want to do consulting or banking. It's a very tight timeline.
Yeah. It seems like a busy weekend too.
Yeah, it was very busy. And I didn't even mention travel. So business schools are, it's known that if you go to business school, you will be traveling a lot. I mean, it depends on how much capacity you have and how much, financial resources you have for doing that. But if you're planning on coming to business school, I'd say set aside like $10,000 just so, you can travel with your friends and enjoy this time, because I think it's very, very important, again, to make those connections, to get to know people better, and to grow as a person. I think it's very important you do that. So, I mean, I didn't do this as much, but I know a lot of friends who would travel like every second weekend to because Boston is close to, like Vermont or like Acadia, Maine. Whenever they get a chance, they fly out somewhere.
Fantastic. So before I end, I think I'll just probably want to ask an overarching question. And over the time that you've had in academia and work, what were the moments when you first settled in, or even later in life, which were mistakes or failures or even embarrassments for you? You seem to be such an accomplished person, but everyone goes through life with maybe some of this. Which ones would you reflect on, and what were the learnings you'd like to share?
Yeah, I have many of those. Where do I start? I guess the one big sort of failure I think about a lot is when I was 17 or 18, and I had no idea that I wanted to come to the US for pursuing higher education. And like every other engineering student would do, I was preparing for IIT JEE and other state-based Indian exams. And there's just so much pressure on you to do well. Like that exam is offered once a year. And I thought for me personally, it was a lot of pressure. I did not perform well under that pressure. I did not do as well as I had hoped. And that was heartbreaking on many different levels. But that was also the time where I realized that this is not the end all be all. There are other things that I could be better at, and I could do well, and there's more chances that are there in life for me. And that's when I reached out to you, and we started with my application process for Cornell. So I think back on that time a lot because that was a personal low for me. There's a lot of people expecting you to do well, including yourself, and when that doesn't happen, it's disappointing. But had that not happened, I would not be here at all. So my biggest learning, I mean, there's more failures that I can talk about. When I first did the GMAT, I did horribly. But then just like this notion, I feel like the education in US, it gives you more chances to do anything. Like you could take the SAT a few times, you could take the GMAT a few times until you feel good about the score and until you feel that you have displayed what you wanted to. And I feel like giving people chances is important. And although I felt very disappointed when I didn't do well in IIT and other exams, I'm so grateful that happened and that allowed me to be here and experience the education here in the US. And I couldn't be happier.
Well said again. And I think just learning and listening to you has been kind of a role reversal moment for me. I've picked up so many interesting cues, and I'm sure our listeners and our students would gain a lot from this conversation. So thank you for your time, and look forward to following your work. And I will be organizing a few panels, and I'll invite you not just for chemical engineering, but could be even life gyan in general for students in college. So thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I'd be very happy to connect with anyone who